What if I told you that the fate of Middle-earth wasn't decided by the strongest sword, the biggest army, or the darkest magic, but by choices so human, so painfully real, they could have been ours? The Battle of the Pelennor Fields wasn't just a clash of good versus evil. It was a masterclass in leadership, timing, sacrifice, and the raw grit of people who refused to back down, even when hope was hanging by a thread. And honestly, it defies every fantasy cliché you've ever seen. A woman slays a monster no man could touch. A ranger turns the tide not with brute force, but with a broken sword reborn. And an aging king redeems himself with one final ride toward death and legacy. Most people think epic battles are all about strategy. But Tolkien, he wrote one that's really about soul, about how healing matters more than conquering, about how fear can't win if someone stands in the gap, and about how real power often hides in the places no one's looking, beneath a helmet, beside a wounded friend, behind a quiet act of courage. So if you've ever faced a moment that demanded more than you had to give, if you've ever felt underestimated, overwhelmed, or just flat out unready, this breakdown of the Battle of the Pelennor Fields will show you why those are the exact moments where legends are born. There are moments in history and fiction that feel like the whole world holds its breath. The Battle of the Pelennor Fields in Middle-earth is one of those moments. Minas Tirith stood alone, proud but weary, with its steward broken by grief and its prince Faramir lying wounded, barely clinging to life. Outside its walls, darkness gathered, Sauron's armies ready to crush what remained of Gondor. It wasn't just a siege, it was a reckoning. One of those days where the fate of nations rests on thin hope and unspoken prayers. This wasn't a fair fight. Not by numbers, not by strength, not even by morale. While Mordor's legions swarmed with discipline and monstrous cruelty, Gondor's defenses had cracks, physical and emotional. Yet here's where it gets interesting. Sometimes what tips the scale isn't size, but heart. Think about any great challenge you've faced. Odds stacked, time short, fear whispering in your ear. That's the energy Gondor was under. But you don't need certainty to act. You just need resolve. Faramir, that brave soul, symbolized a choice. Fight or fall, no in-between. Even unconscious, he stirred the hearts of men. And that's often how change starts. With one wounded symbol, others refuse to give up on. Just like in real life, where one passionate person can reignite a team, a family, or a movement. It's less about perfect conditions and more about what you choose to stand for when the walls begin to shake. And in Tolkien's world, standing matters more than surviving. What makes the prelude to this battle so powerful is how layered it is. You're not just watching swords clash. You're watching legacy, destiny, and despair wrestling all at once. The tension, palpable. The silence before the storm, deafening. And for the reader or viewer, this wasn't just another fight, it was the fight. Every thread in Tolkien's masterpiece felt like it had been woven toward this very point. And that's the mark of genius, making a battlefield feel like a crossroads for the soul of the world. But the calm was temporary, and darkness never waits politely. As Gondor braced for the blow, Mordor's first strike came not with steel, but with terror. And that's exactly where we're headed next. When the attack finally came, it wasn't just about battering walls, it was about breaking minds. The Witch King of Angmar didn't need to outthink his enemies. He needed to unnerve them, to twist fear into a weapon sharper than any blade. Siege towers loomed like shadows given form, and the sky rained fire and despair. This wasn't strategy. In the traditional sense, it was psychological warfare, and that's something we often underestimate, both in fiction and in life. What hit Minas Tirith wasn't only steel or flame, it was the unrelenting weight of dread. Imagine opening your window and seeing severed heads hurled over your city's walls, each one once a friend, a brother, a commander. That's how you kill hope before you kill people. The Witch King understood something many forget. Sometimes the strongest stronghold isn't stone, it's spirit. Break that, and the walls collapse on their own. It's the same in leadership. When morale crumbles, performance follows. And yet, even in this darkness, a strange kind of light flickered. Gandalf the White didn't just fight with power. He fought with presence. He walked the battlements not to cast spells, but to cast certainty. That's what real leadership looks like. He didn't promise safety. He inspired courage. Prince Imrahil too stood like a pillar, elegant, noble, and unshakable. It's proof that even in fantasy, the most valuable leaders are the ones who bring calm to chaos. You can take this lesson straight into your own battles. When everything feels like it's falling apart, your business, your health, your peace, you don't need all the answers. You just need to show up. Walk your own walls like Gandalf did. Speak light into the fear. Encourage one more hour of courage. Because oftentimes, that's what turns the tide. Not magic, not miracles, just someone willing to stand firm when no one else will. But of course, hope from within can only last so long without help from without. And far beyond the White City, a new front was forming, one led by a ranger turned king, sailing toward destiny with an army that didn't breathe. While Gondor burned and hope dimmed, something wild was unfolding far to the south, something only Aragorn could have pulled off. Most people forget that before he was a king, he was a wanderer, a tracker, a man of the shadows. But here, at Pelennor, he showed the world what a true king in the making looks like. Picture this, a cursed army of the dead, bound to an oath, surging through enemy ranks like a storm no man could stop. That's not just tactics, that's destiny breaking through the fog. Pelennor wasn't some footnote, it was a pivot point. The Corsair fleet wasn't a side threat, it was meant to choke Gondor from behind. Had they arrived on time, the Pelennor fields would have turned into a graveyard. But Aragorn, he played a hand no one saw coming. Using the paths of the dead wasn't just bold, it was borderline insane. But that's what leadership is about sometimes, taking a risk when everyone else plays it safe. It's the kind of move that separates followers from legends. And if you've ever led a project, launched a business, or made a life-altering decision with no guarantees, you know this feeling. You reach a point where the only path forward is the one that scares you most. Aragorn walked it, literally through darkness, fear, and doubt. And on the other side, victory. We all need to remember that the bigger the fear, the more likely. It guards something meaningful. That's not just Tolkien. That's life, raw and real. But let's not overlook the brilliance of timing. Aragorn didn't just win the battle, he made it count. He turned those black sails from a death sentence into a miracle. Just imagine the faces on the battlefield when those ships appeared. Dread, then disbelief, then a roar of redemption. It's a storytelling masterclass, and it teaches us something crucial. When you show up at the right time, with the right help, you can turn even doom into deliverance. And as those ships cut across the Anduin, carrying the hope of the South and the courage of the dead, another army, bound by blood and honor, was thundering through the hills to write their own legend. And then came the sound, distant at first, like a rumble beneath the skin of the earth. The riders of Rohan had arrived. Just when darkness had the upper hand, the east blazed gold with the rising sun and the thunder of hooves. Theoden, king of Rohan, didn't ride in like a man chasing glory. He charged like a father defending his children. That's not poetry, that's leadership at its rawest. He wasn't just commanding soldiers, he was calling men to remember who they were. You want to talk about speeches? Forget TED Talks. Theoden's cry before battle should be studied in every leadership seminar. Forth and fear no darkness. Now that's how you rattle bones. In 5 seconds flat, he turned dread into fire. And let's be real, you don't need a battlefield to use that kind of energy. Whether you're leading a team through layoffs or standing up for someone you love, courage often comes down to one powerful voice at the right time. Be that voice. The presence of the Druidain, those mysterious forest-dwelling people, was another genius move by Tolkien. It reminds us that unexpected alliances often make all the difference. The Rohirrim wouldn't have gotten there in time without them. It's a beautiful reminder for real life too. Don't underestimate the quiet ones, the behind-the-scenes allies. They're often the reason you even make it to the front lines. Now picture the charge, 6,000 riders roaring down on an army that thought it had already won. Horses screaming, banners whipping, sunlight flashing off spears. It was thunder made flesh. And in that chaos, the enemy faltered. This is one of the greatest cavalry moments in all of Middle-earth. Not because of perfect strategy, but because of perfect timing, unshakable will, and a king who knew this might be his last sunrise. And yet, he rode anyway. But war doesn't. Respect poetry. And in the fury of battle, the shadows struck back, not with brute strength, but with a chilling force no man had yet faced, until a disguised warrior stepped forward to rewrite a prophecy. Now here's where the story throws a curveball so sharp it could split a tower in half. The Witch King, armored in terror and prophecy, thought he was untouchable. "No man can kill me," he said, arrogance dripping from every word. And then, bam! Eowyn shows up, removes her helmet, and delivers one of the most iconic lines in Middle-earth: "I am no man." If that doesn't send chills down your spine, you might want to check your pulse. Let's talk about Eowyn. She's not your typical fantasy heroine. She's not waiting in a tower or asking for permission. She rides to war. Disguised, yes, but not to deceive, to participate, to protect, to matter. And that's something so many people wrestle with, especially in a world that still shuffles people into boxes. Eowyn's moment wasn't about proving anything to others. It was about breaking free from what others thought she couldn't do. That's a life lesson hidden in plain sight. And Merry, let's not overlook him. A hobbit. Small, overlooked. Yet in this pivotal moment, it's his blade that weakens the Witch King enough for Eowyn to strike true. Two underdogs, two forgotten fighters. Together they brought down what entire armies feared. That's Tolkien whispering something profound. Greatness doesn't always wear a crown or carry a banner. Sometimes it walks quietly beside you, underestimated, until it's too late to stop. Prophecy in Middle-earth isn't rigid, it's poetic, layered. Glorfindel's words weren't a trap, they were a window, and through it, Eowyn leapt. This is what makes Tolkien's world so timeless. It blends myth with meaning, the idea that destiny can still surprise even fate itself. That's not just clever, it's electric. And whether you're fighting for your place in a boardroom, a relationship, or your own reflection in the mirror, this scene reminds you, your moment is yours to claim. But of course, even victory has its cost. The battlefield wasn't done collecting its toll. And as the roar of triumph began to fade, death came knocking, one noble king down and another consumed by madness. Glory comes with a price, and Middle-earth never lets you forget it. Theoden's final moments weren't dipped in gold. They were soaked in honor and inevitability. After leading the charge of the Rohirrim with unmatched courage, he faced his death not as a victim, but as a warrior who had done his duty. His fall wasn't tragic, it was sacred. And yet, knowing that doesn't make it any easier. Watching a good king fall always hits different, especially one who found redemption just before the end. The contrast between Theoden and Denethor could not be sharper. One rode into battle to protect his people. The other locked himself in a tower, clinging to shadows and Palantiri visions. Denethor's descent into madness was more terrifying than orcs and siege towers because it was real. It mirrored what so many face when despair festers unchecked. Instead of seeking help, he gave in, and in that pit of hopelessness, he tried to take Faramir with him. It's a dark reminder. Isolation is a killer. Gandalf's role here wasn't to fight a monster, it was to fight despair. That's something we overlook too often. Sometimes the greatest battles are the ones that never make it to the history books, the ones where someone shows up just in time to pull another soul back from the edge. When he saves Faramir, Gandalf doesn't just preserve a life. He protects Gondor's future. It's a quiet act, but one that echoes far louder than any clash of swords. Theoden's sacrifice and Denethor's implosion are two sides of the same coin. One chose hope even in the face of death. The other surrendered long before the flames ever touched him. And that's a question we all face, sooner or later. When the darkness comes, will you stand and face it or collapse under its weight? The answer won't just define your legacy. It'll shape the lives of everyone who walks with you, but no matter how heavy the loss, the battle still raged on. And just when defeat seemed sealed, the black sails cut through the river mist, and the tide, quite literally, began to turn. Hope has a funny way of showing up late, but when it does, it hits like thunder. As the black sails of the Corsair fleet rolled in, everyone on the battlefield froze. To the defenders of Minas Tirith, it was the final nail. Reinforcements, yes, but for the enemy, you could practically feel the morale collapse until Aragorn stepped off the ship, sword gleaming, eyes set with purpose, followed by a wave of unexpected allies. That moment, pure cinematic magic, the kind that makes you believe in miracles again. Let's take a second to appreciate Andúril. This wasn't just a sword, it was a symbol, forged from the shards of Narsil. It carried with it the weight of ancient kings and broken promises now reforged. When Aragorn wielded it, he wasn't just cutting through orcs, he was cutting through centuries of doubt, fear, and exile. It's a lot like life. When you finally step into your full power, you stop asking for permission and start commanding. Presence, you don't just arrive, you announce yourself and think about the timing. Every great comeback hinges on it. Aragorn didn't just show up with reinforcements, he showed up when it mattered most. That's not luck, that's leadership. The kind that watches the board and waits for the right moment to strike. Not too soon, not too late. And if you've ever made a career pivot, taken a risk, or walked into a room where everyone expected someone else, you know exactly how powerful that entrance can be. The visual of him walking off that ship wasn't just dramatic flair, it was a pulse of raw energy that revived an entire army. You see, in war or in any high-stakes situation, momentum is everything. Aragorn shifted the momentum with one step, one swing, one truth made visible. Gondor was not alone. And that one shift, it turned fear into fury. The Western forces, once crumbling, surged back with new fire in their veins, but the enemy still had teeth, and the cost of victory hadn't yet been paid in full. As the chaos surged around them, the battlefield became a crucible of blood, grit, and last stands. The end came not with silence, but with a scream, a final cacophony of defiance, as Mordor's forces collapsed under the fury of the West. The orcs broke first, as they always do, scattered like shadows under flame. But the Haradrim and Easterlings, they didn't run. They dug in. They fought to the bitter end, as if trying to earn redemption in death. And that's the thing about evil. It often masquerades as loyalty, but loyalty without honor is just madness in armor. Victory wasn't clean, it never is. The fields were soaked in loss. Heroes fallen, friends gone, dreams shattered beneath hooves and steel. Middle-earth may have breathed again, but it did so through broken ribs. It's easy to cheer a win when you're far from the blood, but when you're standing in it, every cheer carries an echo of grief. That's what makes this battle real, not just because Tolkien wrote it well, but because he made us feel the weight of what it cost. And you know what? That matters. In real life, we often celebrate outcomes without honoring the effort. We talk about results, but skip over the sacrifice. Whether it's a startup that suddenly succeeds or a family finally escaping hardship, there's always a hidden battlefield behind the scenes. The Battle of the Pelennor Fields is a brutal reminder. No true victory comes without something or someone being left behind. Still, within the ruin, there was something undeniable. Evil had been pushed back, not destroyed. Not yet, but wounded. Mordor's mighty host, thought invincible, had been broken, and it wasn't by overwhelming might. It was by timing, unity, courage, and a stubborn refusal to quit. That's a recipe anyone can borrow. By the way, whether you're building a business, fighting illness, or trying to become someone your past says you'll never be. And so, with the battlefield quieting and the dead laid to rest, attention began to shift. Not toward celebration, but toward healing. And at the center of that shift stood a man with royal blood, healing hands, and no crown on his head. Yet while others might have rushed to claim the crown, Aragorn did something most leaders today wouldn't even consider. He waited. The battlefield was still warm, the people raw with grief, and yet he chose service over ceremony. Instead of raising a banner, he raised the wounded. Instead of standing above the people, he knelt beside them. That's not just humility. That's power in its purest form. Power that doesn't scream, but heals. Let's talk about Ioreth's prophecy. The hands of the king are the hands of a healer. Most brushed it off as an old woman's rambling, but Tolkien knew what he was doing. In a world obsessed with might and military, he gave us a king whose greatest strength was restoration. Aragorn didn't need a throne to prove anything. He proved it with king's foil, soft words, and long nights spent tending the broken. It's a brilliant reversal and a lesson for every modern leader burned out on hustle culture. This isn't just fantasy, it's mentorship hidden in myth. We often think our big moment will come when we arrive, when the world finally sees us. But the truth? The real shift happens when you start seeing others. When you focus less on being impressive and more on being of use. Aragorn modeled that perfectly. He didn't demand loyalty. He earned it, quietly, steadily, one bandage at a time, and in doing so, something sacred happened. The people didn't just accept him, they wanted him. That's the secret most miss. Real influence doesn't force, it attracts. That's true. In leadership, in relationships, even in marketing. When you become the kind of person who heals what's hurting, people invite you to lead. Aragorn never asked for a crown, but when the time came, Middle-earth practically begged him to wear it. And that's where the story shifts once more. From war to restoration, from despair to renewal. But before we go there, let's step back and look at the whole picture. Because the Battle of the Pelennor Fields wasn't just a turning point. In Tolkien's saga, it's a mirror for us all, and there you have it, the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, not just as Tolkien wrote it, but as life often hands it to us. Messy, costly, glorious. If there's one thing this epic showdown teaches us, it's that greatness isn't loud, it's consistent. It's found in those who show up when everything says, stay down. In those who lead with healing hands, who rise when no one expects them to, and who fight not for power, but for people. Now pause for a second and ask yourself, where are your Pelennor Fields? What fear are you letting whisper, you can't win? What power are you still hiding under self-doubt? Because whether you're building a business, trying to heal something broken inside you, or just learning to speak up again, you already have what it takes. You just have to ride out, even if the sky is dark. If this story stirred something in you, don't let it stop here. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a journey through the epic, the timeless, and the deeply human truths inside Middle-earth.